Welcome to the Freak Show, fellow freaks.
I'm Matthew Brockmeyer.
And I'm Christa Carmen.
And this is...
Murder Coaster.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to part 2 of the story of Ed and Lorraine Warren. And although Ghost October may be over, we want to say, if someone tells you Halloween is over, spooky season is gone, know that here at Murder Coaster, Halloween is more than a date on the calendar. For us, every day is Halloween, and spooky season is a lifestyle. And now let's get creepy as we delve deeper into the story of paranormal investigators and sideshow carnival hucksters, Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Ghost versus the Inhuman Demonic Spirit. The 1950s were a time of ghosts, a haunted post-war time, gothic in its black and white sensibilities. It was a time that considered itself modern, but was filled with superstitions of the past. The spiritualists of the Victorian era holding seances had evolved into a more scientific study of ghosts, like Nandor Fodor, once an associate of Sigmund Freud, who sought psychological reasons for the phenomenon, and Harry Price, who sought scientific studies of hauntings, both of whom were inspirations for Shirley Jackson's iconic The Haunting of Hill House, which was published in 1959, a time when ghostly movies like 13 Ghosts and House on Haunted Hill abounded.
And ghosts were considered a legitimate form of study. Duke University had a parapsychology workshop, which culminated in the 1957 book, Parapsychology, Frontier Science of the Mind.
And during this time, Ed and Lorraine studied and sought ghosts, lost spirits dwelling in the liminal space between life and death. As Ed says,
the ghost syndrome is caused when death occurs suddenly or under very traumatic circumstances. The earthbound spirit identifies with this realm rather than the next. Caught up in a confused state of mind, such unfortunates possess life, but no body. Yet body or no, these human spirits are stuck in a temporary limbo. Deep down, the spirit seeks resolve, but it is so caught up in its own trauma and misery that nothing makes sense except the contemplation of its own emotional state. Many times, the ghost isn't even aware that death has taken place. When communication takes place, you often have to tell them. In fact, you gotta convince them that they're dead.
So during this time, Ed and Lorraine's main mission was to reach out to these ghosts and convince them that they were dead. Convince them to go to the light, to find peace by crossing over to the other side.
Like in 1972, when they gave a lecture at West Point, and then were told there was a ghost in the officers' quarter causing mischief, taking items and placing them in strange places, and the military asked the Warrens to investigate.
Lorraine went room to room, putting herself in a trance state, finding beautiful vibrations in a room where John Kennedy had often stayed.
Vavavoom! But in another room, she discovered the spirit of a black man named Greer in an army uniform that had been accused of murder, but was later exonerated. And it was he who had been causing the mischief, doing it to let the army know his sorrow over being falsely accused. So Lorraine spoke to the ghost, saying to him, quote,
Mr. Greer, I have been sent by the army. You are not held in dishonor. Your exoneration is on the records. Listen to me, Mr. Greer. Your sorrow is understood by the army, but it is only proper that your sorrow be over. You are holding yourself back. You must exonerate yourself. You must go to the light. It is time for you to surrender yourself and begin again. Everyone must do this. Focus on the light and step toward it. Go to your friends and family. Go home. Go to the light. He's gone. I think he was just waiting to be dismissed.
While I could find no official corroborating accounts of this haunting, the Warrens definitely did give a lecture at West Point in 1972. It was documented by the New York Times. However, this article I found never mentions the Warrens being asked to remove a ghost. Furthermore, it states that instead of freeing and removing ghosts, after the Warrens' visit to West Point, many of the young cadets started seeing ghosts, presumably after being spooked by the lecture.
But as the 50s became the 60s and morals loosened, and horror movies became realistic and colorized, this obsession with ghosts and spirits began to shift culturally. With the release of Rosemary's Baby in 1968, there was a palpable rising interest in the occult, such as with Anton LaVey's Church of Satan, and more folks began to become obsessed with the devil and demons. And the Warrens were no different.
As Ed would later say, at first the whole concept of demoniacal phenomena was incomprehensible to me, as I'm sure it would have been for anyone. Back then, everyone was searching for the truth, except that it had to be a certain kind of truth. As long as we talked about haunted houses and ghosts, people were delighted. But when we mentioned demonic spirits, demonology, the devil, or religion, a swell of animosity rose up. But all of a sudden, people became interested. And today, there is a tremendous interest in the subject.
And that sudden and drastic change, no doubt, came in 1973 with the release of The Exorcist.
As we've mentioned many times before, the impact The Exorcist had on the world was phenomenal and unprecedented. It was huge, a literal blockbuster with lines circling city streets and shattering records. Theaters averaging 100,000 tickets sold each, generating $441 million worldwide, one of the highest grossing films ever at that time. It was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, a milestone for a horror movie. And it won both Best Adaptation of a Novel and Best Sound Effects. Everyone was talking about The Exorcist, and everyone was talking about the devil.
So you can see in 1971, before the movie came out, when the Warrens go to the Perrin house in Rhode Island, which was the basis for the first Conjuring movie. They were still hung up on ghosts, witches and seances, saying the house was haunted by a witch that killed her baby with a spike to the brain, and they had to perform a seance to make contact with her.
They later claimed to have the actual spike that was used in the supposed murder, which would have been about 200 years earlier. But, spoiler alert, Bathsheba Sherman was not only not a murdering witch, she never even once stepped foot in the Conjuring house, much less hung herself in the yard. And unlike the movie where Ed Warren saves the day with an exorcism, and real life, as the Warrens attempted a seance, the owner of the home punched Ed in the face and kicked him out of the house.
Listen to episode 35 to hear the complete story. It's pretty wild. We'll put a link in the show notes.
And by 1975, 2 years after The Exorcist was released, when they investigated the Amityville Horror House, now it was all devils and demons and possession. No more ghosts and witches. Now it was, quote, demonic forces that have never walked the earth in human form.
But they still hadn't gone full exorcism route yet. They were still very much into seances as opposed to exorcisms.
And when the Warrens showed up in England, completely uninvited, in 1977, to investigate the Enfield poltergeist, they were saying that it was obviously demons and devils and not ghosts.
They also started saying there was a lot of money to be made, which caused them to be rebuked by the other investigators and turned away. But the Warrens were persistent in trying to force themselves into the story and would soon return.
The Enfield poltergeist is actually the most well-documented haunting in history and was actively investigated by England's Society of Psychical Research and thoroughly covered in the press, who often called it the council house ghost, in a smear against the family, saying they were low class, as a council house is a form of public housing in Britain. It would be like saying a ghost in the projects here in America.
The paranormal activity was centered around two young girls, Janet, 11, and Margaret, 13, whose beds were moving, drawers were opening. There was knocking and voices, all the classic stuff. And the cops had even been called and witnessed a bureau inexplicably wobble.
Ooh. Most famously, the girls claim that they were levitated and thrown around by spirits. And there's these creepy and somehow disturbing pictures of Margaret bouncing on her bed as proof.
When the Warrens showed up with their team, it was, quote, chaos. And the mom, Peggy, was upset she hadn't been notified they were coming.
Ed was described by the family as arrogant, rude, and foul-tempered. And this doesn't seem like a one-off. I've heard this many times. I was talking to a paranormal investigator on Reddit during my research who claims he and the Warrens were investigating a case at the same time. And Ed told him if he didn't get lost and leave the investigation to them, why, he'd give him a knuckle sandwich.
And there's the infamous Sally Jesse Raphael show that we'll soon get to, where Ed screams the entire time, angrily pointing his finger, not letting Lorraine talk, and says to a skeptic who accuses him of being rude,
"Yeah? What are you gonna do about it, huh?"
So once again, the Warrens showed back up to the Enfield poltergeist house uninvited. But now they try to butter the family up, offering to buy the kids dinner. And this time Peggy relents and lets them in and allows them to record a 3-hour interview. And that was actually it, despite what the second Conjuring movie may suggest.
Yeah, they had nothing to do with the case at all. And in the end, the whole thing appears to have been a hoax anyway. A video camera in an adjoining room caught Janet bending spoons and attempting to bend an iron bar. And she was also caught banging a broom handle on the ceiling, as well as hiding an investigator's tape recorder. And the girls pretty much admitted to the press that it was all fake.
Gotta love that. Chapter 2. Sandy Foster and the Case of the Stinky Demon.
In 1978, Ed and Lorraine received a phone call from a distressed woman saying through a line that was distorted and manipulated by evil spirits.
I hope you can hear me. My name is Foster, Mrs. Sandy Foster. I don't exactly know what has happened here, but my children have been hit and chased by something. There's somebody or something in the house, upstairs, in one of the children's bedrooms.
But that is a very creepy call to receive. And Ed called her right back. And as he explains it, when a case is referred to us, we immediately contact the individual or family in trouble. If it seems necessary for us to enter the case, then we'll offer to help. We tell the family that we don't charge money for our time, but we must be reimbursed for basic expenses, such as airfare, hotel rooms, and so on. When that's understood, we set up an appointment as soon as possible. Usually, we're on our way within an hour or two.
So it's not true that Ed and Lorraine charged nothing. They were getting free vacations all over, free dining, and then getting paid to write articles and give lectures about it all.
Not a bad way to make a living, honestly.
I mean, I really can't fault them getting paid to write articles and give lectures. A lot of people don't get paid to do that stuff today.
Yeah.
The next morning, Sunday the 14th of May, 1978, the Warrens were on their way to church when the, quote, powerful, rank smell of excrement filled their car. Jesus, Ed, really?
Hey, it wasn't me. It must have been a demon.
Then, halfway through church services, again the same foul odor happened.
Lorraine, in church? Really?
It wasn't me, Ed. Stop it. It was a demon, and you know it.
Okay, Lorraine, whatever. You say it was a demon, it was a demon. Ed and Lorraine then headed to the Foster's home, and Ed interviewed the family while Lorraine walked the house, using her clairvoyant powers to reach out to the demons and spirits.
Soon they discovered that daughter Meg had been into Wicca and had been given a book on conjuring demons for Christmas.
Lorraine Warren says, quote,
Wicca is 4,000 years old, often called the old religion because it predates Judaism and Christianity.
Actually, Wicca is about 70 years old. It was founded by Englishman Gerald Gardner, who introduced it to the public with his 1954 book, Witchcraft Today. But we're not going to get into all that, or the alleged New Forest Coven, or the controversy surrounding the witch cult hypothesis. Maybe on another episode. But the point here is that the Foster's daughter, Meg, had been experimenting with occult practices and had accidentally opened a portal to hell and allowed a stinky demon to come infest their house.
In telling this story to author Gerald Brittle in the book The Demonologist, Ed says, quote,
The demonic spirit attempts to remain anonymous, but in the long run, it really can't. It leaves telltale signs of the preternatural power. For example, these spirits usually disregard the physical environment. The demonic makes things out of nothing. If solid, these materializations are warm to the touch, indicating some process of energy manipulation. I have a collection of these apports, as they're called.
Gerald asks him, have these apports or teleported substances ever been scientifically analyzed?
Absolutely. This physical evidence is necessary to document the need for an exorcism. Whenever these substances manifest in a case, I take a sample and send it to a laboratory for a compositional breakdown. The apports most frequently produced are urine, bile, vomit, blood, or excrement.
So, just to be clear here, Ed Warren is finding substances he claims have been manifested by demonic forces, bringing them to scientists, and the scientists are telling him, well, that's a hunk of human shit you've brought us to analyze.
Is that why it smells like that? I thought it was a demon making that smell.
No, sir, you are just holding a piece of shit in your hand.
Yeah, but it came from a demon. I swear it.
And then there were objects that would go missing. So what about items that dematerialize during hauntings or demonic infestations? Often money or valuable possessions will just disappear. What happens to it?
Ed says about this, quote, "Between you and me, I'd say there's roughly 100% chance that the money gets teleported to a sorcerer or someone involved in the black arts. I say this because I know sorcerers who have never worked a day in their life, yet they're financially well off. For them, everything falls into place. Life is easy. Money finds them. Why? Because they've made a metaphysical arrangement and work in league with the demonic. Though that may sound harmless, there's a hitch. These sorcerers or witches are usually in debt to the demonic to the tune of their soul."
And Ed says when it comes to the case of a house infested with a demonic spirit, it's often important to provoke the demon, to get it riled up and angry in order to prove its existence, saying,
"Well, it's dangerous, but also a revealing tactic. I'll send everyone out to lunch and stay in the house myself. In some cases, Lorraine will stay with me. Knowing what I'm up against, many times I'd feel more comfortable carrying a tire iron and a shotgun. But you can't kill something that's existed since the beginning of time. Now, if a ghost is responsible for the problem, then it'll usually show itself to me. It knows the joke's over, and a ghost really wants no quarrel with God. But if it's a demonic spirit, sworn to hate God and repulsed by the religious object, then sooner or later things will let go. Up will rise the stink of some foul odor. I may hear something explode. A threatening voice sounding like no human voice you ever heard. Unseen hands may scrawl an obscenity on the wall in front of me.
And here is the big question. When Ed would send everyone out of the house so he could be alone to confront and banish the demons, did he really go around praying and throwing holy water? Or did he just relax on the sofa watching TV, kicking his feet up on the coffee table? In other words, did he really believe his own bullshit? Did he even pretend to when no one was around to see his act? Or did he just raid the refrigerator, even swipe a couple bucks that was laying around on a bedroom dresser, later blaming it on a sorcerer?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is up for you to decide. I have really no idea. I like to imagine it either way. And honestly, both versions are absolutely hilarious.
According to Ed, he and Lorraine did their weird magic in the Foster house, divining mysteries, praying, throwing holy water, binding the demonic spirits. And when they reached the basement, a, quote, dank smell arose in the room. Really, Ed, right now in the middle of our investigation?
Lorraine, who hath smelt it hath dealt it. You're worse than them demons. What have you been eating?
So as they went about binding the rooms with holy water and prayer, they went into daughter Meg's room, a place spiritually unclean because of the crystals, candles, and books on Wicca.
They could sense this was the source of the infestation, and they focused all of their demon-ridding energy there, praying and throwing holy water. Finally, Lorraine shouting at the demon,
"Give us some sign of departure, or an exorcism will be conducted here this very day!"
And with that threat, the stinky demon fled. The temperature returned to normal, the horrible stench relinquished, and, quote, the spell was broken. Or the smell was broken.
They threw away Meg's candles and books and sanctified the room, further banishing this stinky demon. Voila! That easy.
They banished a fucking demon. Now it was time to get a big old steak and hit the bar at the hotel the Fosters were paying for and drink some very expensive scotch.
And to quote the book, The Demonologist,
"The Fosters barely understood what happened in their home. They were simply victims who had seen the supernatural as a plaything, when in reality, they had been the toy."
Chapter 3. Shout at the Devil.
She's a vision from a haunted television, like a scene with a horror movie theme. She's a killer, a real lady killer.
By 1981, the Warrens were not just claiming demonic activity and possession, but were directly involved with very public exorcisms and had their own clergy they could call upon, including a bishop, as well as a cardinal they called in the Gratzel case, which was the basis for the third Conjuring movie.
This cardinal, who showed up to the house in a red convertible Porsche, as documented by the family, quickly greenlighted an exorcism for an 11-year-old boy, something that usually takes weeks or months to arrange.
The exorcism was held in the chapel of a local Catholic high school, some of which was audio taped.
It was an utterly bizarre case, which had begun with a haunted waterbed that the devil used to lounge on, and ended up with a very, very real murder committed by family friend Arnie Johnson, who'd been to the exorcism and later got shit-faced drunk and killed his landlord, most likely because the guy had been fucking his girlfriend.
But of course, the Warrens claimed it was Satan himself who committed the murder, and not poor Arnie Johnson, and his lawyer argued the same thing, having Arnie plead innocent by demonic possession, a first in the United States.
6 somber-faced Catholic priests sat front row in the courtroom, and when the judge ruled demonic possession was not a legitimate defense and he'd allow no evidence of demonic possession, each of the priests stood at the same time and marched from the courtroom, and the Catholic Church never mentioned the incident again.
To hear all the details of that crazy, crazy story, you can listen to episode 52, Shout at the Devil. We'll put a link in the show notes.
It appears that this case, the infamous Devil Made Me Do It case, which was the basis of the third Conjuring movie, was the height of the Warrens' involvement with the Catholic Church. And they may have even had a falling out afterwards.
The family of the possessed boy claims that after everything happened, they no longer felt welcome in church afterwards. And for the Warrens, whether or not the Catholic Church was involved with their next case would become a huge issue and public scandal.
Chapter 4, The Snedeker Haunting.
This story, which was the basis of the fourth movie, The Haunting in Connecticut, is one of the most bonkers hauntings ever, and would lead to some of the craziest moments of television history, and really shed a light on who the Warrens were.
The setup to this story is just so good, too. There's this family, the Snedekers, husband Alan, wife Carmen, children Philip, Bradley, Alan Jr., and Jennifer. And like the Lutzes in the Amityville case, the older children were the wives from a previous marriage, and Alan was their stepfather.
The oldest son, Philip, was diagnosed with cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma, and had to constantly travel from New York to the hospital in Connecticut for treatment. A grueling 5-hour trip.
So the family decided to move to Connecticut to be closer to the hospital, and found a beautiful 5-bedroom, 2-bath colonial home on 208 Meriden Avenue, and the family moved in on June 30th, 1986.
To their horror, the family discovers that their dream house had once been a funeral home.
Not just that, much of the equipment had been left behind, including an elaborate chain and steel contraption that was used to hoist bodies up from the basement, which was the mortuary, and into the master bedroom, which had been the viewing chamber. Their dining room was the former chapel.
There were also photographs of the dead, coffin pillows, and toe tags. And really eerily, a stained chamber in the basement floor used to drain and dispose blood.
I don't really find it scary as much as just gross. I don't think I'd be scared to be there at all, but I'd probably gross myself out just thinking about all the weird things that they do to dead bodies to prepare them for viewing. Remember that show 6 Foot Under? Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I never watched it though.
It's pretty cool. It's like a family-run funeral home.
Much has been made over whether or not the Snedekers knew the place had been a funeral home before they rented it. The neighbors, the owner, and the real estate agent all insist they were told multiple times, and point out that there was an actual sign reading Hallahan Funeral Home beside the front door.
But Carmen Snedeker insists that the sign was covered by a piece of plywood, and it was all kept a complete secret from her and her family, and that she only found out the truth after first having disturbing dreams, and then finding all the former funeral home equipment.
Like the Lutzes in Amityville, after moving in, things began to change for the family. They grew irritable. The stepdad started drinking more and more. Things moved and went missing, there were voices, and much of it centered around Philip, who began listening to heavy metal music, stopped going to church, and took to wearing a leather jacket with a skull on the back of it.
Like all cases involving the Warrens, there's different versions, discrepancies, and things just don't really add up. But Carmen's teenage nieces from Alabama moved in, Kelly and Trish, though often their names are changed. And as we'll see, you'd want your name changed too if you were involved with this haunting.
So now it's 2 adults and 6 children, and the stepdad is getting wasted every night. It's just pure pandemonium.
Philip is saying that the house is evil, and he's blaring Ozzy Osbourne, rest in peace, and apparently doing a lot of drugs and hearing voices.
On a positive side, his cancer had gone into remission. But on the negative side, he was hearing voices nonstop and became strange and cruel. He wrote disturbing poetry about necrophilia that went...
Fiddle with the dead. Last night, so soft and quiet. Sneak into the mortuary and fiddle with the dead. Ice blue skin, making me turn red. I don't care how she died. I like the smell of formaldehyde. Fiddle with the dead. Fiddle with the dead.
And very, very disturbingly, Philip would go into his cousin's room at night and molest them while they slept.
Yeah, it's seriously not cool. It's fucked up. Then he broke into a neighbor's house, trying to steal a gun, apparently, to kill his stepfather with. The police were called, and he was hauled off to a psych hospital.
He'd eventually be diagnosed with schizophrenia and say that when he was given the proper medication, all the ghostly voices in his head stopped.
But as he was being arrested and put into the back of the police car, he shouted out, "Now the family won't be protected, and it will attack you."
According to the story, he was right. The haunting grew even worse. Now the demonic entities were making themselves known to the rest of the family. Lights going on and off, objects levitating, noises and strange music, like a 1930s big band.
But worst of all, the demons were now sexually assaulting the cousins, as well as both Carmen and Al.
For months, the family remained in the house, the sexual assaults and paranormal activity growing worse and worse. And finally, they contacted the experts, Christian demon-fighting superheroes Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Ed and Lorraine Warren were there in no time, and as Ed interviewed the family, Lorraine wandered about the house, half in a trance, hands held out, and she had a vision of, quote,
dead bodies, boys and girls, men and women laid out as if after some kind of terrible catastrophe. But something worse, much worse. Hands, rough male hands that reached down to fondle the dead bodies, to touch their most private parts in horrible ways. Fingers closing over limp, dead male genitalia, entering the cold, dead private places of the women, roughly pulling and probing, and worse still, laughter. The laughter of depraved enjoyment and excitement, the grunting of sick, malignant passion.
Sick Malignant Passion. That's the name of my new band. The images of perversion and necrophilia so overwhelmed Lorraine that they actually blinded her. They were so horrible, and she struggled to even breathe.
After conferring with Lorraine alone, Ed announced to the family,
"The news isn't good. I think it's pretty clear what we're dealing with here. It's very old, very cunning, and absolutely without a doubt, very, very evil."
So Ed, Lorraine, and 4 assistants moved into the house, including Chris McKenna, Ed and Lorraine's grandson, and their nephew John Zaffis, bringing video cameras and recording equipment and all kinds of ghost-busting gizmos. Basically just like in the movie Poltergeist, which had come out 4 years earlier.
Ed claims they filled a videotape full of paranormal activity, videoing objects levitating, disappearing, reappearing, the body lift in the basement running on its own, the clank of the chains as it lifted upwards, disembodied voices, bangs, grunts, screams.
Unfortunately, this videotape was somehow misplaced before he could ever show it to anyone. And no one has ever seen it. Bummer. Such a shame. He had absolute undeniable proof, but managed to somehow lose it.
Oh, Ed, get it together, man.
One night, Lorraine was visited by a spirit in a filthy shirt and baggy pants, with black, stringy hair that fell to his shoulders, who said to her through a mouth of cracked lips and rotten teeth,
"Nice bodies. Nice, cold, firm bodies. You don't move when you touch them. Don't fight when you hold them or lick them. In fact, you can do anything you fucking want to them. I'll show you. You can watch me. See? I'm ready again.
Then the evil spirit unzipped his pants and pulled out his lumpy purplish dick.
Yes, he exposed his ghost cock to Lorraine, and it was covered in dirt and blood.
Seeing the demonic penis caused Lorraine to faint from shock, and she awoke with Ed kneeling at her side, saying,
Lorraine, what is it? What's wrong?
Necrophilia, Lorraine whispered.
Necrophilia?
I saw something. A man. He wanted me to watch.
It was then they realized that someone had engaged in necrophilia in the house when it was a funeral home. And it was this act of having sex with dead bodies that had drawn the demonic forces to the house. Incubuses and succubuses, sex demons, summoned through esoteric necrophiliac orgies of astral necromancy.
At one point, Carmen would claim there were once workers who were actually arrested, charged, and found guilty of necrophilia. But this claim has been just about debunked at this point, as it's been searched and searched and searched, and there's no evidence of this at all.
Meanwhile, the former funeral home director and owner was in his 90s at this point. Just like a nice old man, retired. And all these unfounded allegations about his former funeral home were absolutely scandalous and incredibly troubling to his poor family. It's pretty fucked up accusations to make with absolutely no proof at all, besides Lorraine's visions of a ghost stick.
Well, the only way to rid that place of the horny succubuses and incubuses causing so much trouble and exposing themselves to poor saintly Lorraine was to have an old-fashioned exorcism.
Yep, they were gonna have to hold an exorcism. But before that, well, the press had to be alerted. Extra, read all about it.
Chapter 5. A Current Affair.
So, in 1986, as the demonic haunting reached full effect, the tabloid television show A Current Affair came to cover the case. Carmen looking into the camera and saying,
I've never seen a green monster. I never seen a monster of any kind, but this is a monster. A real monster, not one out of a book or movie.
She goes on to explain how she was repeatedly raped by demons, then looks right into the camera, smiles, and says with a twinkle in her eye,
I was sodomized doing dishes.
After saying how a violent apparition raped and sodomized her and her niece, the reporter asked Carmen why she didn't just leave. And she says,
Where would I go? Children need stability.
Even if it could kill them.
Hopefully it won't kill them.
It's just crazy. I love how she's telling a reporter that her teenage nieces were raped by demons. And then in the same breath says, well, they stayed in the house because children need stability. What the fuck, dude? And honestly, I don't know. She seems fucked up to me. Her eyes are all glassy. She's slurring her words, though she would claim to be completely sober. That is, besides nonstop chain smoking.
One of the craziest things is the house was actually a duplex with an upstairs apartment unit. So they had an upstairs neighbor the whole time.
And the upstairs tenant tells A Current Affair that the Snedekers had rented it knowing full well it had been a funeral home. and that the talk of ghosts didn't start until after they fell behind on their rent. When asked what paranormal experiences she's had, the upstairs tenant says,
None. No rapes, no sodomizations, no hands, and why isn't it upstairs? Why the H isn't it upstairs?
And then Ed Warren was interviewed and said, what we're saying here is that in many homes that were funeral homes, necrophilia was performed. Necrophilia would be a case of the dead bodies. Now, we're not saying that the owner of the funeral home did this, but it is a door that could be opened up.
And when Ed says the only thing that can stop the infestation is an exorcism, and the interview asks Ed the name of the priest that's going to come perform the exorcism, Ed suddenly gets pissed and says,
This is a bunch of baloney. Come on, Lorraine, let's get out of here. And he basically grabs Lorraine by the elbow and just hauls her away as the interviewer keeps talking, saying,
I'd like to discuss this more if we can.
I'm not discussing nothing with you. We're through.
Your credibility is safe here, sir.
I don't care about credibility, pal.
Then everything takes a crazy turn when Tammy and Carmen say they'd watched the movie The Entity, and the haunting was similar to that. And a current affair noticed that the haunting wasn't just similar, but was nearly exactly like the movie. And it was almost as if Tammy was talking about scenes from the movie when recounting being sexually assaulted by the demon.
Chapter 6. The Entity.
So, The Entity is a 1984 horror movie about a woman being sexually assaulted by a ghost.
We discussed it on our History of the Ghost movie episode that is on YouTube, if you care to watch it. Apparently, Jim from the Horror Movies and Shit podcast was deeply traumatized by this film as a child, or at least according to Mark.
The movie is based on the true story of Doris Blither, an alcoholic with severe emotional trauma, who in 1974 was a single mom in her 30s with 4 children, 1 girl and 3 boys, by 4 different fathers.
Doris just happened to run into paranormal researcher Carrie Gaynor in a bookstore and told him that she and her children were being violently assaulted by a trio of ghostly entities. So Carrie, along with Dr. Barry Taff, a professor from UCLA, agreed to investigate the case.
When Dr. Taff and Carrie Gaynor arrived at the Doris' home at 11547 Braddock Drive, Culver City, the place was trashed. It reeked of rotten garbage. Dirty dishes were piled high in the sink, and at first they were reluctant to investigate. But after the children and family friends all told them of levitating pots and pans, strange sounds and smells, and objects being thrown by unseen forces, they decided to try to document the claims.
Doris told them that one of the entities, the largest one, was sexually assaulting her as the other 2 held her down. And there were witnesses who did see Doris seemingly being attacked by an invisible force that punched and slapped her, threw her against the wall. And Doris actually displayed injuries common to rape victims.
Investigators claimed they saw and filmed a green mist that became a large muscular torso. But when the film was developed, there was nothing really there besides one photograph of Doris sitting on the bed with a strange arc of light over her head.
Doris eventually moved from the house into Texas, but the spectral rapes continued, And at one point, Doris claimed she'd gotten pregnant by the sex demon. But this ended up not to be true.
Well, Cousin Tammy admitted watching and loving the movie The Entity, and the Snedekers even called the ghosts the Entity.
And when Tammy described the events that happened to her, she described them exactly like the movie, including wrestling with the shower curtain while being assaulted taking a shower, being slapped in the face by invisible hands that can move through objects, and of invisible hands probing and prodding her, which were some of the creepiest scenes in the movie. You can see these invisible hands. Well, you can't see the hands, but you can see the body being all touched. It's a fake body that they made. Whatever.
Chapter 7. In a Dark Place.
No wind, but I could feel the storm inside my mind. No choice but to be young and dumb for the last time. Then you came to me like a wave from the deep blue sea, and I cried, 'cause I knew what it meant to be brand new. I was shining my light, redefined. Ooh.
And so, according to Ed, a Catholic priest came to the house, an actual demonologist, who blessed the home and concurred, yes, the place was lousy with sex demons. So he returned with another priest, and they held a mass in the house, delivered in Latin.
Sientes veterem hominem nostrum simul cum Christo crucifixum esse, ut ultra.
And as the priests performed the Mass, Tammy felt demonic hands tugging at her shorts, caressing her bare flesh with cold, stubby fingers, a voice ringing in her head saying, and this is a quote,
Please hold me close to you, close to your little tits, so I can suck them. So I can suck the fuckers dry, you cunt. You horny little cunt with your pussy lips so wet and your hole open so wide.
Then as the Mass went on, Carmen too was being probed and prodded. And Chris as well felt, quote,
Icy cold fingers wrap around his penis, applying pressure and rubbing just a bit, trying to prime him for love-making. But these fingers were too bony, too cold, like the fingers of a corpse, a long, dead corpse.
Can't even with this,
It's really crazy, dude.
The Mass only made the demons angrier, did nothing to abate their devilish designs.
Tammy would wake up in the middle of the night feeling as if a demon was running razor-sharp knife blade over her erect nipples.
And at last the church gave permission for an exorcism. Well, supposedly. There's a great deal of debate about whether one was performed or not, and who the priest was that may have done it.
But supposedly a nameless ex-Marine Catholic exorcist came to the house, and he started with 3 days of constant prayer and fasting, getting ready to rumble. And Ed and Lorraine were there to watch his back.
As the priest read the Ritual Romanus, or the Roman exorcism ritual in Latin, which is what you do for extra tough demons, real pesky kind, they hate Latin. As he read the rites, cabinets rattled, knickknacks toppled, pictures fell from the wall, and just like with that priest in The Exorcist, Ed had a heart attack.
Then the entire house tilted, the floor rising up into the air, and smoke rose from the carpet, forming clawed hands, and voices filled the room, low, hoarse, and guttural.
And naked and bruised human bodies oozed out of the walls, saying,
We loved it, all the fucking and sucking, all that groping and fondling. It was wonderful.
And the priest began shouting the rites louder and louder until only his voice remained. And then a great shift happened, as if the room was filled with sunlight and goodness. The horrible smell disappeared, the ghosts and demons relinquishing, banished.
Ed's heart attack went away.
Thank God.
The house brightened, the sun penetrating the window panes.
Ed looked at the exorcist and said, I think it worked, Father. I think it worked.
Yay, they'd done it. Banished evil from the house and sent the demons back to the depths of hell.
And now that the exorcism was over and the house was clean of demons, there was only one thing left to do. Write a book about it and cash in. Ka-ching!
This was such a doozy of a story. The Warrens decided to hire one of the best writers in the spooky story business to write it. Grand Master of Horror award-winning author Ray Garton, author of Live Girls and Ravenous, among many, many others.
Fantastic writer, and I was actually kind of friends with him. He lived in Reading, not too far away from me, and we had a friend in common. And Ray ended up reading my novel, Kind Nepenthe, and he loved it. He wrote me an awesome blurb that I still treasure to this day. A really nice guy. And when we covered the Warrens a couple years ago, I was going to have him on the show to tell us about his experiences working with them. But unfortunately, he was like really, really sick. And sadly, he passed away on April 21st, 2024.
But Ray was very vocal about his experience writing the book with the Warrens, saying about it,
As I gathered all the necessary information for the book, I found that the accounts of the individual Snedekers didn't quite mesh, and they just couldn't keep their story straight. So I went to Ed with this problem. Oh, they're crazy, he said. Everybody who comes to us is crazy. Otherwise, why would they come to us? You've got some of the story, just use what works and make the rest up, and make it scary. You write scary books, right? That's why we hired you. So just make it up. Make it scary. And I talked to a couple of other writers who'd written books for the Warrens, and their experiences were almost identical to mine. They said they were told to make up whatever they needed to make up and to make it scary. Ed and Lorraine were frauds who passed off the fiction they fabricated as real events. Once I realized the whole thing was a scam, a complete lie that had been whipped up for the sole purpose of selling to the public as a true story in the form of a book and maybe a movie, I didn't like the fact that my name was going to be on it. But I'd already signed the contract, and to get out of it, it would have required attorneys and legal fees that I simply could not afford at that time.
He says he was allowed to talk to Philip only once and over the phone. But once Philip started saying that all the voices in his head went away once he was put on medication, his mother abruptly ended the conversation.
The Warrens kept telling Ray that they had this videotape of demonic activity in the house, but they never showed it to him, and he couldn't get into the house or visit it because the owners claimed it was all a hoax, and they hated the Warrens.
And Ed gave Ray a brand new origin story. In this version, the ghosts that visited him as a child weren't his former landlady and his nun aunt, but his ultra-Catholic grandfather.
In this version, Ed didn't drop out of art school to paint haunted houses. He actually graduated, and he had a degree in fine art.
But Ray did his job and wrote the book called In a Dark Place.
And of course, he actually did a fantastic job. I've read a lot of books the Warrens hired folks to write for them at this point, and this was definitely the best one, as far as, writing goes. Right now, I'm reading the demonic werewolf book.
In a Dark Place was picked up by Dell Publishing and slated for a Halloween 1994 release. So the Snedekers and the Warrens had to get out and stir up some publicity. And they did so by appearing on the Sally Jesse Raphael show in one of the craziest 45 minutes of television history.
Chapter 8, The Sally Jesse Raphael Show.
Talk shows were legitimately insane in the 90s. Openly exploitational, perverse, shocking, ridiculous, exercises in absurdity.
And the title of this show, the actual title was, ready? I Was Raped by a Ghost. And immediately it gets crazy, as Sally Jesse had an actual bed on the set that she asked Carmen and Al to get into and recreate their sexual assaults in, saying, quote,
Al, you say strange things happened to you and Carmen at night while you were in bed, and we want you to show us what happened. We have a bed here today, which is about the size of the one in the house. So we're going to set the scene. Now you're about to tuck in for the night, when all of a sudden you hear music like this. What happened next?
As Carmen and Al get into the brass bed and pull the covers up over themselves, the lights dim and orchestral music begins to play. Really, really cheesy music, like Lawrence Welk. And Al tells her, well, Sally, the music would wake me up at night. 1930s music, like from an old Victrola.
Al tells Sally how he'd begun wandering the house at night looking for the source of the music, which no one else could hear, bringing a gun along with him, and that he grew scared he was accidentally going to shoot one of the children.
Then Carmen told how the bed would begin to vibrate. A quote,
gentle vibration at first that grew worse and worse. There was a pulse and a heartbeat in the bed.
Carmen explained how a large man with tiny feet would tiptoe around the edges of the bed, tugging at the covers. And Al said, quote, one night we were lying in bed. Carmen had already fallen asleep. I felt this strange sensation coming over my body. It started at my feet and started climbing out through my body. I was froze, couldn't move. Then I felt this stinging penetration in my anal area, and I was trying to scream or cry out, but I couldn't move. After a while, I don't know how long, it went away. There was no more sensation. Then I woke Carmen up and said, honey, I think I was just sodomized by a demon.
And as he's saying this, sitting in the brass bed, there's a banner beneath him reading, Al says he was sodomized by a ghost.
Al truly looks like he's struggling not to laugh. He definitely doesn't appear traumatized. I mean, to my eye. Disclaimer, I'm not a psychiatrist or paranormal investigator for that matter. But then Carmen pipes up, saying,
this happened to me as well, Sally. A tedious pain. So penetrating. There was no pleasure in this. And when it would take me sexually, it would laugh with such pleasure. It enjoyed what it was doing to me. And I was so terrified I couldn't move. It was the most crippling thing in my life, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
Then teenage Michael, the younger brother, is there wearing a comically large tie with a pastel desert print and wide matching suspenders, looking like a very young Larry King. And Sally asks him,
now, Michael, you actually saw a ghost?
When I seen it in different shapes. The first time I seen a ghost, it appeared as cat-like eyes up on the ceiling looking down on my bed. The second time I saw a ghost, it looked like my little sister. The lights were flashing on and off, and I looked over, and it looked like my little sister laughing as she flicked the light switch on and off. I got up to go over to her, and she ran up the stairs. I went upstairs and asked Mom, "Did Jenny come running through here?" And she said, "No, she's been in bed all night."
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, it's absolute proof. An audience member asks, "Was there any medical evidence you were raped? Did you go to a doctor and get examined?"
Carmen shoots back, "Why would we? I mean, we couldn't see it. How did we expect anyone to believe us?"
Al says, "It wasn't like a normal rape, like person to person."
The audience member simply says, "Oh," and sits back down.
Sally Jesse then says, "Now, Carmen, there was one point where you say you were actually possessed by a demon, and you, Al, you witnessed it?"
This was one of the most terrifying experiences. And I've drawn some sketches, if I may.
At which point, Carmen holds up a piece of paper covered in pencil marks with the outline of a body erased into it, and says,
I was surrounded by darkness. I couldn't feel my skin. I couldn't make myself speak. I couldn't see nothing but blackness. The entity opened up a hole and started shouting obscenities at me, and when I began to pray, he got worse. I went into a place called Ithram, a desert road of hot tears through lost souls. I could actually feel the emotion, the anger, the hurt, the desperation, the sadness. I was there for 8 hours.
One of the audience members asks, "Now you say you were molested. Were you molested outside of your home? Did they follow you?"
Carmen smiles, a happy glint in her eye, looks right into the camera and says, "One night I ran down the street being sodomized the whole way." That's freaking insane, dude.
Another audience member asks,
If they were being molested in their beds, why didn't you leave? You have children to worry about.
Al says, "Where would we go?"
Then they bring out the neighbors, as well as the new tenant, who says it was all a hoax to cover up for the fact that the Snedekers owed 6 months back rent. Which, by the way, it appears they never did pay.
Yeah, they all say the Snedekers just stopped paying rent, claiming it was because the house was haunted, though they never moved out.
When the new tenant says he's seen nothing of the supernatural, Al says to him, "Well, I guess the exorcism worked. You're welcome."
And the new tenant says, revealingly, "Well, I don't think there ever was an exorcism there."
One of the neighbors shouts, "If there was an exorcism there, who did it?"
And Carmen says, "She can't tell." And another neighbor says, "Well, I talked to Father Kabbalah and no Catholic priest went in there. They said no Catholic priest has been in that house since the last funeral was held."
Then it devolves into a screaming match over whether the funeral home sign was visible or not when they moved in, which is finally broken by one of the neighbors screaming, "Nothing happened until you got behind in your rent."
The audience makes a collective gasp and falls into an uneasy laughter.
Then the Warrens are brought out. Lorraine with her hair pinned tightly back, all prim and proper with a white blouse buttoned to the neck and a formal red jacket.
Ed is in a camel hair sports coat, tie, and V-neck sweater, and they waste no time in getting to the meat of the story. Sally Jesse asking him,
Ed, you both launched an investigation into the house, and you discovered a very shocking thing that actually happened in the funeral parlor involving the bodies. What happened?
"Well, we feel through our investigation that necrophilia, or abuse of corpses, had occurred in that home. Not necessarily by the Undertaker. It could have been anybody that went in there. Now, this case is not as isolated as these people may think. We have over 70 cases very similar to the Snedekers. And remember, the church was very involved with this. So he's saying he's got 70 other cases where necrophilia caused a portal to hell to open and allow demons to come out.
That's what it sounds like.
That's crazy. That's a lot of 70.
Sally asks, who was the priest involved?
The priest was a Father A, and there were 3 other priests, and this can be bore out through the records of the chancellery.
A neighbor shouts, how about a name? Just one name, a full name.
Ed shouts back at him, Father A is the name I give you. I don't have to give you nothing.
Carmen then starts yelling, these are secret things.
Secrets? The neighbor shouts. You're sitting here talking about being raped and sodomized by some sort of entity, but you won't give a name?
Ed shouts.
It was all backed up. Were you in the house?
A neighbor in the audience stands up and asks if Carmen was aware her son was taking illegal drugs, and she admits yes, she did know that, though it was something she'd later deny. And the kid says,
he used to come over to our house and tell us that whatever we wanted, he could get.
A paranormal skeptic named Joe Nickel, who says he's investigated fake hauntings for 20 years, begins to speak. And Ed Warren, who's sitting right beside him, starts shouting at him. And the skeptic says, I heard you were a loudmouth who shouts over people. Now give me the chance to speak.
You're full of a bunch of lies. We have the evidence. We have the proof.
You're a loudmouth, Warren, and we all know it. But if you'll just let me finish...
Ed begins wagging his finger in the guy's face, saying, well, when you're concerned, then I'm a loudmouth, huh?
Show a little class, Ed. You're on national TV.
I'm not gonna show class to someone who's sitting here showing nothing but lies.
Be careful who you call a liar.
Yeah? What are you gonna do about it, huh?
Sally Jesse finally has to break in, saying, guys, Joe, what's your point?
And Joe tells her,
this is a hodgepodge, part poltergeist, part ghost, part demon, part this, part that. We saw a similar pattern with the Amityville Horror, a case that the Warrens thought was genuine. It turned out to be a blatant hoax concocted over several bottles of wine.
Nobody ever proved that. Can you prove that?
Yes, I can prove it. It's been proven. The evidence is very clear in the Amityville Horror, and the whole packaging of this story. The book says it's slated for Halloween release. It was written by a professional fiction writer who writes horror stories. The whole packaging is a crock.
Sally breaks in, asking Joe if the church had been involved.
Carmen screams, he's an atheist! How would he know?
Joe calmly replies,
the newspaper article that I have says the diocese refuses to confirm if they had an exorcism there. If there was an exorcism there, I don't understand why they can't just come out and say so.
An audience member asks if they are still being haunted, and they say no. And Sally Jesse Raphael says, I guess the exorcism worked.
And then the credits begin to roll. Absolute lunacy.
And it's on YouTube. I'll put a link to it. You should watch it. It is something. It is hilarious. But that is where we're going to have to leave you today, ladies and gentlemen, as sadly we are out of time now. But be sure to tune in next week to the conclusion of our series on demonologists and paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. And we'll be taking a deep look at the accusations of abuse and fraud and the legacy the Warrens have that continues to this very day.
Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you've enjoyed it.
And I want to give a big shout out to the Deaths, who let us use some of their songs today. I love these guys' music, the Deaths. It's eerie and elegant. spooky and haunting, but sophisticated, like something you might hear in a David Lynch movie. There's links in the show notes to their Spotify and their Instagram page. Definitely check them out. And we're going to close with their song, I've Been Haunting You.
You're so pretty when you're sad.